Hello my friends, in today's video we will take a look at Panasonic Lumix S 100mm f2.8 macro. With the basics out of the way, Panasonic continues to build the L-mount lens selection with more niche offerings. 100mm macro is a versatile type of lens that can provide a lot of creative options. I don't want to spoil this review too much, but I will say that this is quite a special lens. In this video, we will take a look at the performance and the features of Panasonic's L-mount macro in combination with the S5 II. 100mm is an interesting focal length suitable for example for portraits, short telephoto landscapes or product photography. It also provides sufficient working distance for most types of macro photography. I think that it is very suitable for flowers, small objects such as wristwatches, and it also works well for insects. This is a real macro lens, which means that it can provide 1:1 or 100% magnification. Of course, it is just as useful for shooting non-macro subjects. The first and very significant standout feature of this lens is the size and the weight. It is just 82mm long and it weighs 298 grams. That makes it the smallest and the lightest type of this lens on the market by a big margin. For example, it is less than half of the weight of my Sony 90mm f2.8 macro, which is pretty amazing. It is also the same size as Panasonic's f1.8 primes, which is great for gimbal use and overall ergonomics of the system. Mounted on the S5 II, it is very well balanced as expected. The build quality is very solid, much like with other Lumix S lenses. The outer part is made of plastics, but the quality of materials is above average and maybe even premium. It is weather sealed with a proper weather sealing gasket around the mount. The mount is metal as well, of course. 100mm Lumix S uses standard 67mm filter thread. This is a very common filter size, which is also shared with other Lumix S primes. The markings on the front of the lens are dark gray to prevent reflections in macro situations. A lens hood is included in the box. It is a high-quality plastic lens hood with a release button. The size is about right for this type of lens. The control elements on the 100mm macro include the focusing ring, AF/MF switch, and focus limiter. The focusing ring is quite special. This lens uses a focus-by-wire system, but the resistance is in my opinion set perfectly. There is quite a lot of resistance and artificial feel, which makes sense for a macro lens. The angle of rotation or turning speed can be adjusted in the menu. If you set it to 1080 degrees, you will be able to make extremely precise focus adjustments, which is very important in macro photography. You can also choose between linear and speed-sensitive focus ring operation. Autofocus manual focus switch is nice to have in case that Panasonic releases a body without AF/MF switch on the camera. The focus limiter lets you choose between full range, 50 cm to infinity, and close-up range. Using limited ranges makes the autofocus faster, so I would say that it is worth using them. So how about the image quality? I have tested this lens with a 24-megapixel sensor in the S5 II. This sensor has very low pixel density, which means that this test should be a piece of cake for a modern macro lens. As expected, the image quality in the center of the frame is as good as it can possibly be with a 24-megapixel sensor right from f2.8. The resolution is maximal, the contrast is great, and there is pretty much no chromatic aberration. The contrast actually gets even stronger at f4, which reveals a little bit of chromatic aberration, which is sometimes the case with these brutally sharp macro lenses. The chromatic aberration is pretty much gone at f5.6, where we can see absolutely perfect image quality. The image quality at f8 is the same. I don't see any diffraction at f11, which is quite important on a macro lens. f16 is a bit softer, but still more than usable. The corner sharpness is also outstanding right from f2.8. The resolution is great, the contrast is very solid as well, and there is no chromatic aberration. The contrast is even greater at f4, where we can see perfect image quality in every way. That continues at f5.6 and f8. f11 is once again diffraction free. The resolution starts to decrease from f16, but it is still usable. Even with a 24 megapixel sensor, it is pretty clear that this is an extremely sharp lens. In combination with a 24 megapixel sensor, it is perfect. There is not much more to say there. The contrast is great even at f2.8, but from f4 it is really punchy and it gives the images that kind of pop typical for these ultra sharp lenses. Here I have to stress again that this is an 8.2 cm long lens weighing 300 grams. Lens profile for Lightroom is already available. It fixes a bit of pincushion distortion. There is a little bit of vignetting at f2.8, but that is completely gone at f4. At 100mm on the full frame, you can get very pronounced subject separation at f2.8. That makes 100mm macro lenses very suitable for portraits. The rendition of the bokeh is very nice in my opinion. These very sharp lenses tend to leave a bit more texture in the autofocus background, which gives the bokeh a bit of extra character. It has 9 aperture blades, which is average by today's standards, but it seems to be enough. The transitions between sharp and blurred parts of the frame are still pretty smooth. Overall, I am happy with the bokeh on this lens. 100mm Lumix S is a real macro, which means that it provides 1:1 magnification. The minimum focus distance is 20.4 cm. The image quality at the minimum focus distance is as good as at infinity, at least with a 24 megapixel sensor. There is no ghosting or excessive chromatic aberration. It is still usable from f2.8 to at least f11. The effective f number at minimum focus distance is decreased by 2 stops. Despite that this is a macro lens, the autofocus with Panasonic S5 II is very good. If you use the focus limiter, it is pretty much as good as any other Panasonic lens in usual situations. It is very fast and always 100% accurate. It actually works just as well in video. The S5 II has a great video autofocus and this lens won't limit its capabilities in any way. The autofocus mode is completely silent, so it won't be picked up by in-camera microphone or by shotgun microphone. Much like any other macro lens, it exhibits a ton of focus breathing, which is perfectly normal. If you need to do some focus pulling in video, simply don't use a macro lens. Panasonic's 100mm macro is not stabilized. I was a bit worried about that because I do a lot of handheld product photography, but it was quite okay. With the S5 II's in-body image stabilization, I was able to get 100% sharp product shots at about 1/40th of a second, which is a bit less than with stabilized 100mm macro lenses. Also worth mentioning is that the S5 II has a 96 megapixel pixel shift mode, which can capture a great amount of detail. I recently made a 1-year long-term review of the S5 II and S5 IIX, which will be linked in the description. To sum up, Lumix S 100mm f2.8 macro is quite an achievement for Panasonic. This is another example of modern lens design that really pushes the limits. 82mm long 300 lens with pretty much perfect optical performance was unheard of just a couple of years ago. The size to performance ratio of the 100mm Lumix S is off the scale. The build quality is solid, it is weather sealed, and the autofocus works with no issues. Also worth mentioning is excellent manual focusing. The bokeh is very nice, although it would be interesting to see 11 aperture blades on a macro lens such as this one. I understand the decision to not include optical image stabilization. It is what it is. Despite that, Lumix S 100mm f2.8 macro is one of the most impressive lenses that I've tested in a long time. That size to performance ratio is just amazing. I will definitely revisit this lens with a high resolution sensor in the future, but for now I very highly recommend it. So that's it for this video, thank you for watching, I hope that you liked this video and that you have found it to be useful. Stay tuned for more videos and maybe consider subscribing if you don't want to miss my future content. I appreciate your feedback in form of thumbs up or thumbs down. If you would like to ask anything or share your opinion, please do so in the comment section, and see you next time.